Hi everyone, the Lone Wolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. As always, we'll start with a bit of news. And well, this is of course the first EVE Talk in the Uprising expansion that launched this week. Pretty smooth launch, I would say, and from my personal perspective, I love the sound changes that are now in. Even just running a small anomaly on the Ishtar, you get all those different weapon sounds from the Rat's blasters sounding different from railguns. My own drones doing damage. I actually have projectile weapons on my Ishtar. It's really very nice, and you don't get the overwhelmingness and the cracky sound that you sometimes get when a lot of stuff is happening. So I think that's a major improvement. So yeah, for those guys that always mute EVE Online, it might actually be worth it to put the sound up for some of your gameplay at this point. Also from my perspective, I'm also at the moment focusing on the heraldry. So I've got my first two alliance emblems. I went for the first one that I could like. That's a pretty cool unique ship. I think it's called the Apotheosis, one of those Society of Conscious Thought ships that you could just buy straight from after on day one. And then now I also have the Tristan, and my next goals are the Wraith, and then I definitely want the Myrmidon as well. Those are ships that I'll actively use, and so I kind of want the emblems on the right ships at first, but it's pretty cool. It's slow going, but it's just on a 24-hour basis, and so far, except for day one, they have been quite doable, rather cheap little destroyers and things like that. So we'll see how that evolves, but that's a race that I'm basically, or a task, a daily task that I'm basically incorporating now in my daily EVE Online gameplay. I have seen a lot of streamers do a lot of faction warfare stuff. Obviously, big update there. I personally don't really have a good feeling on how things are going, except of course we also got a scope video where the Galente Federation started an invasion in Caldari space, somewhere completely different from the races, and basically the race is won by Caldari quite definitively. So war is heating up as well between the factions, and I think that's basically the storyline that's going to continue up until we get the allegiance system, perhaps where all sides decide that this is total war, and any neutral capsuleers that want to help us will now have an avenue through a system that CCP is developing in order to pledge their allegiance and then be able to take part in activities as well. So it could be pretty cool, but of course at the moment I'm still a little bit on the sidelines. I will also take a quick look at the agency, maybe just to see what happens here, because yeah, there we go. So the stellar campaigns between the Galente and the Caldari are over. Caldari won both of them, and the Galente have not managed to get any of their goals, so no Stargate and no data research for Triclavian Tech, and at the moment still Amar and Minmatar that are basically duking it out, you could say, but both of them finished that, and so I think CCP will now have a little bit of a storyline about what's going to happen there between the Minmatar and the Amar Republic. That should be a little bit more balanced, basically, because of course the Amar blew up a sun, sorta, and then the Minmatar won't be very happy, but they'll have access to tech as well. So it could be very interesting. I am personally looking forward to how the story develops as well. We'll take a quick look at the New Eden store here as well, see what's happening. So we get a sale happening on Defense, Imperial, Liberation and State Union packs or Protectorate packs. Not really sure what's in those, but I think it's from the icon. You get some Omega Clone Time, Broodix Navy, alright, some skin, expert systems, that's what that icon is there, and then some more skins. Alright, so those are on sale. We get new packs as well. Multiple pilot train certificates are now in the New Eden store. Interesting. And oh, this one I basically saved that up for this EVE Talk as well, but at the moment you can basically get 7 days of free Omega. Just open up the New Eden store and I think you can just grab that for free. I'll do that, processing your purchase. I hope it doesn't show anything wrong. Completed successfully. Omega Clone Time has been added to your account. So just know that this option is there, and if you're an alpha player but you want to see or take a look at the game from the Omega perspective, you now get a free teaser for 1 week. We'll take a quick look at the services here, so that they are expanding the services now with the let's see, the sales here for the packs, including those expert systems, and then we get the multiple pilot training packs as well, 1, 3, and in bigger chunks that have their innate discounts, just like the Omega time. So interesting. For me, of course, being an EVE partner, at the moment, I don't really need any of that. That means that we get to move on to the market, and we will start with the pilot services. We already spotted that on the ticker as well, 520, that plex is, well, stalling. So let's get in there. Here is the plex chart, and you can see how we have started to flatten out, and at the tail end even see a slight pullback in plex itself, going down a little bit. What's behind this? Of course, that's difficult to say. Is this the market just gauging first how the expansion is going to be received and how the players will react to it? That's a possibility. Another possibility is that there are more players taking a look at the game and increasing the supply of plex as well. Of course, seeing that they are getting still very close to, but just below 5 million for the sellers. Buyers at 474. That is still a pretty decent chunk of ISK, of course, and so sellers even in the Tranquility Trading Tower are just below 5 million. And a little bit more aggressive in the buying, but not by much. So at the moment, we are not seeing the continued rise of plex as the expansion hit. Then we've got the multiple pilot train certificates, which of course CCP probably did a sale if we look at these charts. And then of course you saw that they basically changed the New Eden store from that perspective as well. Oh, I've got an air program reward. We'll take a look at that later. Hope it doesn't bother you guys too much that there's some icons there. But yeah, very sharp decline, of course. Massive volumes. That's usually a CCP sale, of course. Down to 1.5 billion almost. Let's say 1.6 billion for most sellers. Buyers, though, below 1.4 billion for the trading certificate. This is, of course, a massive impact from CCP doing a sale. And let's remember, this is actually the highest volume for the year as well. This will take a rather long time for the market to absorb, considering the normal daily volumes that we see for the trading certificates. You can see here, previous sale, that's probably a little bit over half the volume that we're seeing here at the top. It took 1, 2, 3, 4 months before this was fully absorbed and that it found its way back to a new high point from before the previous price. So a very big sale here, very big price move in the trading certificate, and this will probably be very slow for the market to absorb. The skill extractors next, actually doing something quite different from plex, although from the perspective of the high point, right, we're basically plateauing just below the previous high point here in September. Our skill extractors are basically retreading that point here as well. This is probably because they got their own sale that drove prices down a little bit more than plex, and so we've got this catch-up move that's happening here. On the skill injector front, here are the large skill injectors. Ooh, also a pretty sharp decline back below 900 million ISK on pretty sizable volumes as well. 870 million for the first seller, 875 for most, and we're talking 843 million for the buyers. That is definitely yeah, quite a sharp drop off all of a sudden, although from a very pronounced 1-year high point as well. Super expensive price above 900 million, maybe not all too maintainable for the market here. So nice volumes though, showing that to me is a sign that there is some activity coming back into the game with the uprising expansion. Small skill injectors are next. They are of course doing something very similar, reaching 1-year high point of close to 200 million, but at the moment going down rather sharply. 180 for the sellers, 158 for the buyers, opening up some margin here as well. Next up, we've got our daily alpha injectors, which of course had their sale happen around 2 weeks ago. That drove the prices down to close to 40 million. That is being absorbed rather quickly, but we are stabilizing at around 50 million, which I think is a price CCP will be somewhat happy with. 51 million for the sellers and 46 million for the buyers. But I do think that that new price point where CCP is likely to intervene has gone up from 50 to maybe 60, maybe 70 million ISK. We'll have to, of course, see how that evolves, but I think that 50 million is going to be a lot harder now under the current real life prices for services in EVE Online to be maintained from a market perspective. Demand just is high enough in the daily alpha injector market, I think, to ask for a higher price compared to the supply under the new price rules. So could be 60, could be 70. We will see what CCP does, but they clearly intervened again. Massive volumes brought the price back down to 40. We're already back at 50, but with hesitation quite clearly here on the 5-day moving average. So the expansion is here. I would say we are seeing some signs of more activity, some supply coming in, I think, in the pilot services, some sales happening as well. But overall, we're not making new highs. We will, of course, have to wait and see if that becomes a trend. Then we get the hypercores, and they are currently hovering at 1-year high points. So here the inflationary pressures, I think, are still showing through on this one. 530,000 for the sellers, 510 for the buyers. Very, very narrow margin at these highest price points. It does mean, I think, that the market might be setting themselves up for quite a little bit of ISK coming into the game. And if I'm not mistaken, that's also a change. Potentially ratting ISK from nullsec will go up in supply substantially, because these reserve banks will now basically make all ratting ISK available again for those that then take the extra step of emptying those banks. So overall, I think that there is some inflationary pressures, and then to see that Plex is clearly hesitating, we've got some sales happening, all of that is putting some general pressure on the prices of these pilot services. Is that sustainable? How long will that last? We will, of course, have to wait and see. Next up, the minerals, and if you took a look at the ticker, then that might be quite interesting as well. 1150 for minerals. And let's get started, of course, with titanium, which you saw has made a very sharp move up. And on today's daily prices, it's kind of crazy. Not really sure what's happening there, so I have to browse a lot, do a lot of... Oh, and I can't even... Oh, there's actually a limit to how much lower you can get the scale going. So it is impossible for me on this EVE talk, because of what's happening here on the min-max price chart for titanium, to show you guys a nice chart for TRIT. But you can see on the volumes that we do have some crazy moves happening, and percentage-wise, of course, we went up quite substantially, with sellers of titanium going up to 420, 422 for the sellers. Very, very good news, of course, for high-sec miners, and buyers forced up above 4 ISK as well, with over 3 billion units being bought here 3 days ago. So I think the expansion has brought in some extra surprise demand all of a sudden for titanium, maybe from unprepared players or more patient players that were basically still taking advantage of those lower prices, because sizable moves are usually made, I think, by prepared parties. But yeah, look at that front page, 585 coming into play, with just like maybe 1.5 billion units or so to be bought. That's actually a possibility that titanium might go up even more at this point. And I think it's those new ships, right? You want to make those big dreadnoughts. That does also take quite a few minerals. On top of that, faction warfare is heating up. We'll see more destruction there, probably more mineral sinks that are becoming active. And so we've got these crazy prices from a perspective here above 4 ISK for both buyers and sellers for titanium. Very good news for miners, especially those as well that have held back a little bit on their titanium supplies. Let's see if this is also happening for pyrite. What's happening here? Another very weird chart. So we clearly have a little bit of a problem. You can see here 750,000 is the range for the margin here. So I will not be able to show you guys a good chart on this one either. So I think if I keep going down, it'll eventually block me from going into the tens. Yeah, there we go. At 500 ISK, it blocks off. Volume wise, I mean, it's a lot more, but it's not that crazy. And we're talking talking 1270 for the sellers, but 1231 for the buyers as well. So that extra demand is pushing into pyrite, but I think the price shock here has been a little bit less. But again, some big buyers coming in with 1.7 billion units being bought here at 12. That could really put a floor down on the pyrite price. And then Mexalon, actually to my surprise, doing the exact opposite, breaking through the 70 and heading for 60 on the chart. 68 for the sellers, 61 for the buyers. So still giving back a little bit of ground and basically coming to an average to below average price here for Mex all of a sudden. So for now, I would say what looks most promising is actually some titanium Velspar mining for those high-sec miners. Moving on to low-sec, we've got the Isogen chart that is continuing to edge up with again a very bad min-max, but at least here we can do a little bit of browsing. Let's see if I can bring that up a little bit and show you guys from 100 to almost 500 disc on today's daily average on a 1 year basis. That's pretty impressive, of course. 520 for the sellers, 462 for the buyers, and we're back in that. There's still some reserves, obviously 11 million, 12 million, 10 million. Those I don't think is active supply that's coming in all of a sudden, but a more careful approach again by the sellers now that we've finally broken through that 400 ISK price range here. Took us a while to get through that, but they're more careful, smaller volumes being pushed in, 520, 537, 538. You can see here that they are hoping for those smaller volumes to be absorbable, and thus your average price then putting up a couple billion units at, let's say, 540. This is probably going to help them a little bit as they can then go down the track and we get to 558 before we get 120 million units. So Isogen prices are going up above 500 ISK at this point. Very impressive, especially if Noxium is continuing to go back down, and that's exactly what it's doing. Slow landing here, but definitely below average for Noxium on the 1 year chart. 862 to 855. So look at that catch up, 500 to 850 ISK for Isogen to Noxium. That's a margin that I would not expect to be this low. So maybe Isogen is a little bit high, or supply problems are big enough that it's this low, or maybe there is actually room to grow for Noxium, but it may be suffering from the same problem. If you look at 18 million units on a single sell order, that's quite sizable. We don't really see anything else though. That would be like 50 or 100 million units to keep everything in check. So I'm not exactly sure. Maybe the margin between Noxium and Isogen is just smaller now under the new circumstances in EVE Online. But for low-sec miners, obviously a little bit of Isogen is very good news at the moment, and there are still reserves out there. People are probably making a lot of bank from their Isogen that they've held from a year before and older, but you can see that they're a little bit more careful, willing to slow things down to not spook the market too much, and it's paying dividends because a 500 plus Isogen price is something we haven't seen all year. Best price in a very long time. In nullsec then could be a little bit of a reversal. If you look at the ticker, here is the Zydrine chart that is backing down below the 3000 disc, not too sharply though. We're still at 2.8 almost 2800 disc for most sellers of Zydrine, 2.6 for those buyers. Yeah, this is another one of those overflows on one of those sales here at that 2.610, so we can disregard that one. But overall, a little bit of cooling off in that nullsec Zydrine market, but still extremely expensive, of course. And actually what went up a little bit more in a more volatile way was Megasite, and so this one finally has a bit of a more normal chart when you shoot up from let's say 1750 to almost 3000 disc in a matter of about a week, and you plateau there for 14 days. Eventually supplies do come in to take advantage of these prices as well, and we are down to 2340, something like that for the sellers. Still above 2200 though for the buyers, so we're still on a very expensive Megasite market at the moment. And then finally we've got the Morphite market that's landing back on that 40k price range, 41 for the sellers, practically 40,000 for the buyers. Very narrow margin, so there should still be plenty of supplies out there at the moment, but it's still relatively perspective, especially from my historical price point. I used to invest in Morphite when it went below 10,000 disc. Those days are unfortunately long gone. So minerals, yeah, definitely some movements there, some big moves in the high-sec minerals as well. A little bit of a cool-off in those null-sec, and then low-sec, yeah, mixed picture. So it could be interesting here again to keep an eye on all of that and see how things evolve. But next up, we've got the PI market at 1950. So for PI, I'm also curious because dreadnoughts, larger ships, definitely in part needing PI. I think demand could be up, and we're already at extremely high prices. So let's get started here with broadcast nodes able to stay for the average price above 2 million. That's pretty expensive, but at least we're not making another 1 year high. 2.1 to 1.9 million. Pretty narrow margin, definitely showing strong demand, a very strong price, but the expansion seems to be absorbable by the market, at least from this perspective. Same story in the construction blocks, we're just below 10k on this one, lost a little bit of ground from the high points, but this is still a really good price, 10,000 for the sellers, 9.5 for the buyers, showing strong demand with a low margin here between sellers and buyers. So I would say that most of the jitters, the scary parts and the preparations for construction of those larger ships that may need more PI, especially of course those faction warfare dreadnoughts, has been done before the expansion. When in the minerals you see a little bit of a shock, here so far at least things are quite a bit calmer, and then here first maybe worrying sign for PI here are coolants that managed to stay up above 10,000 disc until the expansion hit, and then now all of a sudden we drop off sharply to 9,000 for the sellers, 8.6 for the buyers, not even on big volumes. So this might just be some returning players that are dumping some of their coolants and being aggressive all of a sudden in their sales. Could also be that there is less demand all of a sudden, maybe because there's no big changes when it comes to industry. So fuel wise, I don't think people expect too much to change, which is of course part of the coolants market here. So very sharp drop off, something we haven't seen in a very long time for a PI segment. Then we get enriched uranium holding on to those gains. A different picture here, 12.5 on the chart, 12.4 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers though. So look at that, bit of margin opening up here, showing that demand may not be willing to keep paying those 1 year high prices or ranges for that much longer. Then we've got our integrity response drones. Well, faction warfare dreadnoughts coming in does push, I think, demand for the more direct advanced PI material goods up a little bit, and so we're back above 2.5 million for the sellers, 2.4 for the buyers. So very strong performance here yet again, but you can see that just before that there was hesitation as the price here went below 2.5 million. On our mechanical parts, holding on to 10k, quite impressive considering it's about as easy to make mechanical parts as it is coolants. This one holding on to 10,000 and buyers at almost 10,000 as well, showing that there is still strong demand here. Miniature electronics, slight pullback here as well, below 12.5, but that's still a very good price, 13 for the sellers, 10.630 for the buyers. And yeah, again, another small warning here, we can't browse through the buyers, so demand might be starting to weaken. Nano factories, very flat here. Is it 900, 940 for the sellers, 860 for the buyers. Feels like it's reasonably well balanced. Organic mortar applicators also close to the high range for the year. A little bit of hesitation at the tail end, but it's still quite good. 840 to 770, yeah, that's still that high range here. Recursive computing modules, still able to defend 1 million, I think, for the sellers, only just. And then buyers coming in at 900,000. Normal margin, normal spread, I think, so that's all okay. Then our robotics that have made their way to 80,000, that's interesting. And I speculated on this a little bit last Eve Talk. I mentioned that with a lot of the refined, I think they are. Yeah, refined PI materials, getting to that 10k. The old consensus price under those circumstances for specialized PI materials used to be close to 100,000 ISK as well. And so I think here there was still some room to grow, and for now robotics is confirming that, breaking through the 80k mark, going for 84,000 for the buyers and for the sellers, excuse me, and buyers are, well, getting super close to that price point. If they give up and you start to get buyers above 80k, we could be going even higher for robotics. But of course, coolants, for instance, is showing signs that there might be a cool down happening here as well. So we may not reach the 100k, but at the moment it to me still feels like, yeah, this is a catch up that specialized PI materials have to do compared to everything that already happened before in the refined PI materials. Rocket fuels building. Even with the launch of the expansion, 12,500 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers. Normal to small margin, very high price range, that's pretty damn good. Self-harmonizing power cores, not breaking out or anything, but easily plateauing above that 2 million, 2.3 for the sellers, 2.15 for the buyers. Our smart fab units, specialized PI materials, and exactly what I was talking about, another one of those catch-up moves here, landing shy of 100k, but 95 for the sellers, 88,000 for the buyers. Best price of the year, so or close to that. And so yeah, on small volumes as well, one of those goods that has basically struggled. You can see that here, 50k even in August. Very difficult summer, prices all over the place. But now the catch-up here for specialized materials is basically happening, or might be ending, of course. Again, that one warning, some signs of weakness in demand are here. For instance, sterile conduits as well. See those minimum prices going below $1 million is not that great, 1.2 to just below $1 million for the buyers. Supercomputers here, yeah, doing pretty well, especially on the 1 year chart here, again at the high end of the range. Sellers above 100,000 for specialized, there we go. 82,000 for the buyers. Has a bit of spread, not great in the volumes, but a little bit better than our smart fab units, so a little bit better price over the entire year. But yeah, we reached 100,000 for the sellers, which I think here we won't go that much higher, and it'll be very hard if demand is lacking for this to maintain. But this was an expected move that I basically mentioned last week. It's pretty cool to see that. Synthetic oil, well, a counter move to our coolants. 1 year high point breakout on very high volumes for synthetic oil, going to almost 13k for the sellers. But buyers, look how careful they are. Still at 9.2, opening up a large margin. I think new suppliers will bring this back down before buyers give up. Then we've got synthetic synapses doing really well, of course, tied to implants. 113 for the sellers, 105 for the buyers. Very high price range. And our transcranial microcontrollers easily above 100k as well, 90k for the buyers. So these are pretty good, but they of course had stronger demand throughout the year as well because of their used cases. And then our water-cooled CPU continuing to build, yeah, very ever so slowly. One of the toughest refined PI materials was stuck below 5,000 disk for very big chunks of the year. Now up to 6,250, look at that, 8,000 disk and even 10,000 disk coming into view on the front page for the sellers. Buyers very careful here, although yeah, 6,000, first one coming in here. That is definitely higher than what they've been used to for the entire year. And then finally, we've got our wetware mainframes that are also still climbing to a 1 year high range at 1.9 million, 1.7 for the buyers. So I would say that generally we're still in a really good spot with strong demand for PI, very high prices, some plateauing, and then the catch up for our specialized materials that is in full swing basically. But our one real warning signal comes here in the form of coolants that have a really sharp drop off. And of course we saw a couple of buyers there buy charts or buy data here where we can't browse. It does show there is some weakness in the market potentially brewing, but for now I think all the new ships, the faction stuff, especially the dreadnoughts, are keeping us afloat quite well, and even building on high ranges for some of these PI goods. So it's a great time to be able to do PI and to have some stocks that you can sell, which is my situation luckily. Next up, advanced moon materials, 28.55. There we go. Let's start as always with the carbides. My expectation, well, I don't know. It's the expansion week, so will this turn things around? I'm not sure. Let's get started. Might look like a first turnaround here as well. Crystalline carbonate definitely going through the 100 disc without too much resistance, and we're 120 for the sellers, 120 for the buyers as well. Now, we'll have to keep an eye on this. I cannot say that this is now the bottom, a long bottom from June to October, and with the expansion we've turned things around, and 150 or something like that might come into play. But this is definitely a little bit more structured and long-lasting than what we're used to, with buyers following suit here as well. You can see here the spread immediately coming back down. That hasn't happened yet, so pretty impressive. First sign for crystalline carbonate that something is brewing here as well. For our Caldari side, it's also clearly going back up away from the bottom prices. Now 150 not in play just yet, 137, 130 almost for the buyers though, so pretty narrow margin. Buyers feeling forced up to higher prices here as well. Minmatar, its Fernite carbide, also made its way up to 125. 120 for the sellers, 120 for the buyers as well. So that, I think, is the difference. Buyers are willing to pay that higher price, and if volatility can take off from here, maybe a 150 could come into play yet again. And then for Amar, a little bit more muted in its response to the expansion, but still a 118 to 116, very narrow margin away from the bottom prices. Will this last? Well, that is of course the million ISK question, right? Have you bought, and are you now looking forward to a sell opportunity, or will we see new supplies crush these prices, and will you be stuck holding the bag if you bought? That's the real question. Well, metamaterials might give us an idea as well. Here are photonic metamaterials for Galente. Well, alright, it's not great, but it's a move away from the bottom as well. Up to 7,000 for the sellers, 6,500 for the buyers though. That is still not great. Yeah, it's a move away from the bottom. And then for Caldari, it's non-linear metamaterials, same story, moved up back to 11,000 away from bottom range, 11 to 9,000, buyers very hesitant here. For Minmatar, it's plasmonic metamaterials. Ooh, that's a big volume, that definitely made a move. 13,000 for the sellers, 10,000 for the buyers, most volatility in the last 3-4 months, so that's maybe a sign, but could get crushed quickly, of course. And then our terahertz metamaterials are able to stay above 10,000 disc here, 9.6 for the buyers, much more narrow margin on this one. So doesn't really give us too much of a good read. Maybe we'll see something in the other advanced moon materials. Here are fermionic condensates. All right. Definitely an expansion jolt up to 50k from a price below 37.5. We're talking 48,000 to 33,000. Look at those buyers, very, very hesitant. It's gonna be a tough battle, I think, for those sellers to be able to maintain this new high price range, but does start to feel like maybe a real bottom could be forming in advanced PI materials. Ferrogel making its way back to 20k for the sellers, buyers forced up here as well, so we're away from the bottom. It's still not great on a 1-year chart, still lost 50% from a year ago, but at least here again a September-October bottom might be on the books. And then Fullerites, unfortunately, showing what might happen in the upcoming weeks for all of those that are giving us a little bit of hope. This one made its way back to 600 disc, most volatile move in half a year pretty much here as well, but new supplies coming in. We're back below 500 for the sellers and well below 500, 475 for the buyers. Hypersynaptic fibers makes its way to 5,000 disc very slowly, so that doesn't tell us too much. Nanotransistors also, potentially trying to form a bottom, but look at those minimum prices already going back down. That's quite dangerous. Phenolic composites 1,250, already showing signs of pressure though. And then pressurized oxidizers, yeah, big volume and another move up. And then we've got ceramic reinforced carbon fiber, also again volumes and a move away from bottom ranges. Ceramic fibers back above 300, not really going below 250 anymore in the last couple of weeks. So we get some signs for stronger demand, a little bit investment money coming into the advanced moon materials, but I would be very careful to already draw conclusions towards the bottom is here and volatility is going to start to pick up. But yeah, it is the expansion. Things might change at this point. I'm very curious. So another one, pilot services, minerals and advanced moon materials, definitely segments that we have to keep an eye on how they'll evolve in the weeks and months after the expansion. Next up, take two ships, 34.25. There we go. We will of course get started with the Basilisk here. Still hovering in that low range, 120 to 110 million. Not a 1 year low point, so I wouldn't make a move on this, but definitely feeling very cheap. Same story with the Cerberus, coming up just a little bit from close to a 1 year low point. Very, very small move in price, 132 to 120, so also still very cheap. Here is the Curse then, not at the bottom price, but of course on a 1 year chart, very cheap as well. We're gonna look for something that's like potentially something that we can make a move on. The Damnation touching 250, so below 250 for the sellers. Look at that, 178 million for the buyers. Our daily averages are still edging on the left side of the 5-day moving average. I think, yeah, right now a buy order could get you a very cheap Damnation, although it's unfortunately very tricky to make it trigger, I think, considering that today's daily average is already up there. But that still maybe needs to be formed. But you can see that here on those medium price might be very difficult to see, but how they went down and down and down, and it's very difficult to actually get something. But it's close to 230 million that someone bought a Damnation yesterday and a couple days before that. So you can gauge the range. I think at 235 you're gonna still have a chance at the moment to grab a Damnation for that price, which is well below anything I managed to do. So feels like an opportunity there. The Deacon, not yet, also edging up but very slowly. Let's see what's next. Here is the Eagle dropping off. All right, look at that daily average, well below the 5-day moving average. So this should be a gap between sellers and buyers, 114 to 103. A couple of buyers, or they just spotted it basically. But yeah, 105, something like that, just above 100 million should be possible. Unfortunately, we won't get a buy opportunity below 100 million for the Eagle. That would be very pronounced, very visible on the chart as well, but I don't think that's going to materialize. The EOS back up a little bit above 250. It's a little bit too late to buy, but that's not enough volatility to sell. Aries doing slightly better. Look at that, 47 million to 38, big margin as we're on the higher end of the 1 year range here, but it's still on the 1 year chart going to be relatively cheap. Flycatcher, right, a little bit of a bump, very shallow, coming back down. So look out basically for a buy opportunity here in the upcoming days. Guardian hovering in that 1 to 130 million, not much to say. Heretic, not much to say. Hound, that could be interesting. Look at that, minimum prices dropping off below 15 million again. We're talking 16.3 for the sellers and 14.6 million for the buyers. You are buying Hound below 15 million, and if you look on this 1 year chart, that is a nice jumping point, and it's a stealth bomber that potentially has the volatility in it. If a group wants another stealth bomber fleet, they'll look at these Hound prices and potentially make that move, especially now, of course. I think Hound, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think the Hound is actually another one of the ships where the emblems are available. It'll take a while to get there, but can you imagine a stealth bomber fleet with Alliance logos, decloaking, bombing the hell out of an enemy battleship fleet and then getting out of dodge? That would be pretty cool. I think might be another extra little bit of spice and opportunity in the stealth bomber markets at the moment. I think they'll be more doable than a lot of the others that are very expensive. So yeah, stealth bombers, maybe Hound, maybe I should try and buy a couple or something like that. Ikitursa max price is going up a little bit, but it's quite doable, still below 500 for the sellers. Next up here is the Ishtar, yeah, away from the bottom, but not moving too much. Kirin above 20 million, that's not where we want to be. And then, ooh, here is pressure as well on the Manticore. How close to 15 are we? 16 for the sellers, 17.6 for the buyers. Lots of supply here still. I would be a little bit patient and hope that we can push below the 16 million before jumping in on this one. Next up here is the Nemesis. Yeah, unfortunately already last couple of days going back up on those daily averages, so we don't get much better than this though. 14.3 to 13.8, you're buying a Nemesis for 14 million, which is really cheap, but not a pronounced 1-year low point. Then we've got the Nighthawk. Nighthawk taking up, going up to the highest price in 6 months at 350. 348 for the sellers, 290 for the buyers. Basically, if you bought those Nighthawks below 250, you do have a sell opportunity, 100 million profit to be taken here if you bought at the right time. But you got quite a few opportunities here just about a month ago, and then 2.5, 3 months ago, right here, late August, very pronounced. I think I will have mentioned that. You get a sell opportunity right here. Then we've got the Oneros going back down towards 100 million. Yep, sellers below 100, so another one. It's very difficult here because of the volumes, but I can't blame anyone picking up an Oneros below 100 million. And then another stealth bomber. Here's the Purifier landing on 15, 15,280, 15,270. You're buying a Purifier for 15 million. Makes a lot of sense to me if you want that stealth bomber investment. And look as well here. 25 less than a month ago. So stealth bombers have that potential volatility still in them. Rooks back above 150, so that's a little bit too late to jump in. Saber also, although first signs of already coming back down are here. Scalpel in the middle, Scimitar up a little bit. Sleipnir, so another command ship that had a sell opportunity up to 350 million. We're starting to come back down. We're still at 300, so that's still a 50 million profit that could be taken here. So to my surprise, a couple of command ships actually just saw tradable bounces, and then we get the Vagabond, a little bit too much in the middle, and same for the Zarmas. But yeah, take two ships. I see some opportunities at the moment to jump in on a couple of the stealth bombers if you are looking for an opportunity in Take 2 ships, and I think those have a good chance of paying off. And then the surprise strong points have been a couple of command ships, and so that brings that damnation chart, does make it look pretty juicy. 178 for the buyers, that is very, very low. If you can grab a cheap damnation and another jump in another command ship can happen, then maybe it is something to consider, but does feel a little bit more risky than, let's say, a couple of cheap stealth bombers. So Take 2, starting to see first signs that maybe trades are back on the menu after the expansion, but we'll need to again keep a closer eye on everything. Next up, the Take 3 ships, 4210. And there we go. Let's get started here with the destroyer. So here is the Confessor, yeah, basically back to the lower end of the range, but you can see how we're lacking volatility and volume. 47 to 43 million, slight bump in the volumes, brought prices down a little bit actually, so it's just not in the right spot, this market, to do anything. Look how flat we are here for the Hecate, just above 50 million. A little bit of minimum prices going down on a couple of days, but very hard to get anything done. You can see how new buyers fill up that gap very quickly. Then we've got the Jackdaw showing some more minimum signs, but I'd need to see basically like below 45 to come into play. We're at 51 to 47 million. That's just not gonna happen. And finally the Zwepel also going down, but you can see how we're basically closing the gap on the minimum prices. So supplies here have brought us back down to a 46 to 43 million range. This is the demand for the Zwepel. It is nothing. There's, in my opinion, not enough volatility here and no reason to be risking anything unless we reach very pronounced 1-year low points. So more action hopefully in the cruisers. Here's the Legion starting to open up a little bit of margin between sellers and buyers. Obviously here those minimum prices trying to go back down, but yeah, we had basically in the last week 180 plus, I think. We're still there. 185 for the sellers, 172 for the buyers. So buy here, sell here. There's definitely some more trade potential in this Legion chart. Same story with the Loki. Look how we went well below the 180 here on the buy opportunity a month ago. Then we shot up to above 200 million or close to that. Everything gone on those minimum price, so buyers had to move up. Very nice sell opportunity, and now we're starting to see those minimum prices come back down. We're not below 180 just yet. We're at 190 million to 177. All right, it's coming into play, but if we could lose these 9 ships here and we see buyers coming in below 170, then you've got a very good chance of grabbing a below 180. And another opportunity might just be forming here if this trajectory on those minimum prices can keep up. For the Loki. So this is way nicer than what we're seeing in the destroyer markets. Even the Proteus joining the party. A little bit of surprise, but Proteus shooting up to almost 250 million sell opportunity. Probably one that anyone without their own initiative would have missed, because I've always been, rather cagey on risking anything in the Proteus market, but there it is, sell opportunity in the Proteus, 235 million now to 213, and you could have bought well below 180, maybe even below 170, I think, even below 160 a month ago. So very, very impressive. Very nice to see that at least in the tactical cruiser market we've got that volatility potential. And then the Tengu just had that spike right here. You can see we're slowly trying to absorb that. Takes a little bit of time. We're still above 200 for the sellers on this one, 206 for the sellers, 192 for the buyers. So again, but we have the reference points here. We need a bit of patience, but we get the reference points, right? If you touch 180, you've got your buy opportunity. So very, very nice to see this back into the cruiser market. And in a big part, I think this is because now if you are blown up in a cruiser, strategic cruiser, you no longer lose skill points. That has made it far more doable for a lot of players, brought the market back alive, and just in time, because really it's the tactical destroyer market that has been completely killed because of all the gas needs for faction ships. So the Tech 3 market, if you're looking for those trades, it's definitely in the cruisers. And for this week, I would say stealth bombers, maybe look into the command ships, and look into some cruisers that might be going lower, like right here, the Loki. Otherwise, yeah, sell Proteus, very nice opportunity. Tengu still at a pretty damn good price. Legion starting to come into that in-between zone from my perspective. But very interesting charts here, and I think with the expansion I don't see any real competition that came in for these types of ships. So I think the tactical cruisers and stealth bombers are still would be my go-to for trying some trades. And then finally we've got the extra product for the week at 46.50. And this is going to be tied to my emblems, but we're going to take a look at the freighters, because I think after Wraith and then Myrmidon, I think I'll want the obelisk, because I have that. Should be a big Alliance logo on that one. So let's go, if I can find them. Is it taller? And this, nope, I think it's going to be then in capital ships. And here are the freighters. So here is the Amar Providence. Well, look at that. High point 10 months ago went up to 4 billion ISK, and we've lost a little bit of ground on that. It's still very expensive, of course. 2.7 billion for a Providence, 2.5 billion for the buyers almost. So very expensive, but came down from its high point early this year. Charons should see something. Well, actually, it is a same story. Of course, we went up to 4 billion ISK here in February. We lost some ground, but this one is also still very, very expensive. 2.6 billion for the sellers, 2.4 billion for the buyers. And actually, the low point here was down to 2 billion about 2 months ago. Then we've got the obelisk also here, and a month ago you could have bought these for 2 billion, back up to 2.5 with a high point above 3.5 here as well. So less than average, but definitely back in an upward trend for these freighters. Same story for the Fenrir, the least expensive, below 2.5 billion for the sellers. And look at that, not that many buyers for the Fenrir at 2.2 billion. Kind of strange because I sometimes see really big Fenrir fleets. They're pretty cool. So the most affordable is the Fenrir I'm gonna see if I have two of them. I'm not sure where my obelisks are parked, but that's gonna be another one that I would love to get the Alliance logo on, and then I'll actually do some freighter movements as well. And then finally we also have the Bowhead, which is of course a rather different type of ship because it moves ships rather than stuff. 2.35 billion to 2.3 billion, so price wise in the same range as all the other freighters. But yeah, the times of cheap freighters are over. These puppies cost 2.5 billion pretty much across the board, which is actually cheap on this 1 year chart. Crazy times for the big ships, but this is the new reality. CCP wanted this losses for these larger ships to matter, and I'd say 2.5 billion does start to hurt if you would lose something like that. And that's going to be it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be looking for trying to grabbing more emblems and keeping an eye on the story, and hopefully we'll get the allegiance system and news on that, because that's what I'm personally looking forward to when it comes to EVE Online. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and as always, I'll see you next time.